Good evening and welcome. This is Primetime News on TV1 for the Newsfirst team. I am Jayamal Ratnayaka. Today is the 2nd of May 2022. Here are your headlines for tonight. Anti-riot squad arrive at Kota Gogama. Former ministers Vimal and Udaya, who objected a government with Basil Rajapaksa, meets the former finance minister and the president. No confidence motion against the government to be tabled on the 4th of May. Legal protection offered to the protesters involved in the Mirihana incident, who were summoned to the CID. Bail not granted to the police officers involved in the Rambukkana shooting. Strike action launched by the Ceylon Petroleum Bowser Owners Association ends. Fuel queues continue across the island. In our top story for tonight, protests opposite the President's office at Gaulface entered its 24th day today. Newsfirst's Nisa Surya-Arachi joins us from the protest site for an update.
As you can see behind me, there is a large crowd gathered here today, and they are here day after day. They are here for weeks demanding the President, the Prime Minister and the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna-led Parliament to resign immediately. And these people are here in peaceful protest.
I think it's about time they step down and allow people to, appoint a proper interim government. I mean, it's highly ridiculous that they keep shuffling the same people and rolling the same people over and over again. People are not going to be happy with that because people don't want them to go home. They want them to go to jail. They want them to bring the money back to this country.
We do not want any more young people sent to the earth prematurely. This is the way to protest and this is the way to effect change.
They need an audit. They can't just go home, they can't just take off. What we need is to clean up the system. The most important thing is that the people who are responsible for what has happened to this country are taken to task too.
Tensions flared at the protest area opposite the President's office this afternoon. Police had attempted to prevent protesters from setting up a stage at the main entrance. The protesters did not take down the tent despite repeated instructions by the police.
ජනාධිපති ලේකම් කාර්යාලයේ ඉදිරිපිට සවි කර තිබෙන හත්තාලය ඉවත් කිරීමට කටයුතු කරන්න.
The police then vacated the area.
අපි බයන අපි නතර වුණත් අපේ ළමයාගේ ජීවිතේත් දෙනවා අපි අනිවාර්යයි දෙන්න පටවන්න දෙන්නෙත් නැහැ හොරා
Another altercation broke out when a truck carrying anti-riot squad officers arrived at the scene. Anti-riot squad officers left the protest area amidst heavy dissent from the protesters. Former captain of the national boxing team Dinidu Sapramadu, who began a march from Giriulla, reached Golface today.
මිනිස්සු ප්‍රශ්න වලින් මිරිගිලා ඉන්නවා දැක දැක අහක බලන් ඉන්න බැරි හින්දා අපි අද අරගල භූමියට ආවා.
Meanwhile, representatives of the Walava Left Bank United Farmers Organization gathered at the Fort Railway Station in Colombo today. The group then marched to the Gotagogama protest site in Golface. We would like to inform the rulers that their time in power is up. If they care for the country and its people, allow someone who can run the country and step down with dignity.
The protest opposite Temple Trees, the Prime Minister's official residence, demanding the government's resignation, entered its 7th day today. The younger generation is carrying out this struggle to remove the corrupt leaders. Listen to them, they have genuine intentions.
මෙතන මේ කොල්ල මේ තරුණ ජීවිත මේගොල්ල මෙතන මේ කාලේ කන්නේ නිකන් මේ මේවට පැලස්තර විසඳුම් අපිට වැඩක් නැහැ. ඇයි පාලකයන් තේරෙන්නේ නැත්තේ මේ බලලෝභීකමට ඇයි තවත් මෙතන වැජෙන්නේ?
The fast at the protest site, dubbed Maina Gogama, continued for the 5th day today. The group engaged in the fast had refused medical treatment.
අපි මේ උපවාසය පටන් ගත්තේ ඇත්තටම ප්‍රධානම දේ ගෝඨාභය ඇතුළු මේ දූෂිත ආණ්ඩුව පළවා හැරිය. දෙවෙනි කාරණේ තමයි මේ පාස්කු ප්‍රහාරය ඇතුළු මිලේච්ඡ ලෙස ඝාතනය වුණා ලංකාවේ ගොඩාක් මිනිස්සු අහිංසක මිනිස්සු මාධ්‍යවේදියෝ මේ කවුද ලසන්තල වගේ අහිංසක මිනිස්සු ගොඩක් මරලා දැම්මා. ඉතින් ආන්ගේ ඝාතනයන්ට යුක්තිය ඉෂ්ට කරන්න තමයි අපි මෙතන ඉඳගත්තේ. නීතිය කියන එක එක් එක්කෙනාට එක එක විදියට සාප්පුවට දාගන්න බෑ.
For the first time, the Sri Lankan expatriates held a wave of protests in the United States opposing the Sri Lankan government. The protests were held in line with May Day that was marked yesterday. The mass demonstrations had been organized by the Sri Lankan Students Collective in the United States. Sri Lankans in 43 US states held protests in solidarity with the demonstrations opposite the President's office in Colombo. They demanded change and accountability over the crisis that has affected Sri Lanka. A protest was held in Washington under the theme, Let's Stand for One Voice. Sri Lankan university students were among those who joined the protests at the Times Square in New York. During protests in San Francisco, Sri Lankans signed a petition to be handed over to US lawmakers.
We wanted to make sure the people who are living in Sri Lanka, they get their rights. As a community, as a people who are living in abroad, we are always with Sri Lankan people.
The petition will be handed over to US Congress members and senators. The petition demanded an investigation into the assets of the Rajapakshas in the United States. Echoing similar concerns, Sri Lankan expatriates took to the streets of London opposite the Parliament in Westminster.
Protests were held in many areas demanding the resignation of the President, Prime Minister and the government. One protest was held at the Talbota Junction along the Negombo-Colombo main road. Teachers were among those who joined the protests at the Gota Gogama protest site in Negombo. The crisis is deepening by the day. The burden on the people is aggravating. We will have to die on the streets. Allow us to live. Give us a country to live. You have had enough of destroying our country. Don't destroy the country any further. Won't all of you listen to our demands? Are you waiting until all of us die? Are you waiting until all our children die? Resign and go away. The government hasn't been able to conduct exams properly for students. They are postponing it. What will be the future of this country? They are focusing only on their personal gains. They are focusing only on their personal gains. When problems arise, they go overseas with their children. Where can our children go to? We don't have a place to go to.
Trade unions have decided to carry out an island-wide hartal on the 6th of May in a bid to further the people's struggle. The National Alliance of Trade Unions revealed further details on the matter today. Regardless of who carries out the struggle, this issue can only be resolved through establishing a new administration following an election. Only that will ensure political stability. Political stability will translate into economic and social stability. We want everyone to join us on the 6th, similar to the 28th. Our attempt to topple this government will depend greatly on the success of this hartal. The people's struggle will be a success through this. Gotabaya, Mahinda and the entire government must leave immediately. Do not worsen the suffering of the people. If they do not leave, the people are ready to make them leave.
මේ රටේ වැඩ කරන ජනතාව සමස්ත ජනතාවත් එක්ක එකතු වෙලා සූදානම් කණෙන් ඇදලා එළියට දාන්න මේ මාසේ 6 කියන්නේ ආණ්ඩුවට අපි කියනවා.
The protest on the 6th will be a one organized by the working masses. It will include the entire nation. We will carry out this struggle forward until this government resigns. That message will be clearly delivered on the 6th of May.
අපි ඉස්සරහට අරන් යනවා කියන පණිවිඩය තමයි අපි මේ මාසේ 6 වෙනිදා මේ හර්තාල් ව්‍යාපාරෙන් දියත් කරන්නේ. අපි එළමෙන 6 වෙනිදා හර්තාලයේදී
Health workers will join this hartal on the 6th. All health workers, regardless of affiliations, will strengthen this hartal and make it a success.
ශක්තිමත් කරන්න හර්තාලය සාර්ථක කරන්න.
The Criminal Investigations Department summoned 15 people who were arrested over the protests opposite the president's official residence in Mirihana in March. They were among the 54 suspects who were granted bail after being arrested in connection to the protests. Lawyers said the CID had summoned the suspects to provide statements. The suspects appeared at around 9:30 this morning and left at about 1:30 in the afternoon. Some lawyers had represented them free of charge.
මේ සිදුවීමට කිසිසේත්ම අදාළ නැති අහිංසක.
They have named some innocent people who are not connected to this incident as suspects. Some of them had come here to pick their friend. Some had come there to withdraw money from the ATM. People like them had been arrested and beaten inhumanely by the police, especially the Special Task Force. They have said that a group clad in civil attire had also beaten them. They must be considered as the victims here. At the Gangodawila Magistrates Court, lawyers clearly showed that the fuel tank of the bus that was set on fire had been kept open when it was brought. That can be seen in photographs. The person who set fire to the bus emerged from the area where police officers had gathered. The police has failed to even identify him. That is how weak national security is in our country. The government shouldn't use these innocent people as scapegoats to cover up their incompetency.
Sri Lankans are continuing to stage protests at home and overseas demanding the government's resignation. Amidst the growing tension and outrage, political parties are holding discussions to solve the political crisis. Former ministers Wimal Weerawansa and Uday Gammanpila have discussed the formation of a new government earlier today. This was during a meeting with Basil Rajapaksa at the President's office. Interestingly, both former ministers had earlier said they would not join a government which Basil Rajapaksa is a part of.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had chaired a meeting at his office at 11 this morning. The meeting took place between independent MPs and the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. Anura Priyadarshana, Wimal Weerawansa, Uday Gammanpila and Tiran Alas represented the independent lawmakers. Nimal Siripala de Silva had represented the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. The SLPP's national organizer Basil Rajapaksa, Chairman G.L. Piris, General Secretary Sagara Karyavasam, Minister Ramesh Patirana and MP Sanjeeva Edrimana were present.
On a policy basis, they agreed to form a national consensus government. This will allow all political parties represented in parliament to join the government and be a part of making decisions, even if they don't take up ministerial portfolios or positions. This will allow all political parties represented in parliament to join the government and to be a part of making decisions, even if they don't take up ministerial portfolios or positions. To overcome the current economic crisis, our party agreed in principle to form a national consensus government. It was the Buddhist chief prelates who proposed this concept first. The cardinal also proposed a concept like this. A similar idea was put forward by various civic groups. I believe these groups and people who presented this idea have a responsibility to appeal those who are not in favor of this to reconsider their stance. The Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna agreed to the facts we presented in the letter. We agreed to launch a collective effort to get the participation of all political parties and not just our two parties.
දේශපාලන පක්ෂ සහභාගී කරවා ගැනීම සඳහා සියලු දෙනාම සාමූහික ප්‍රයත්නයක් දැරිය යුතු බව අපි තීරණය කරා.
දැන් අන්තර්කාලීන ආණ්ඩුවක් හදන්න ජනතා විමුක්ති පෙරමුණවත් සමග ජන බලවේගයක් තාම එකදා බල කරලා නැහැ.
උන් පමණක් නෙවෙයි පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ තවත්.
There are other political parties in parliament. We would hold discussions with all of them in the future and work together towards uplifting the country out of this crisis.
සාමූහික ප්‍රයත්නයක් දැරිය යුතුයි කියන මතය ඔවුන්ට විස්තර කරලා දීලා අපි පුළුවන් තරම් බලනවා මෙයාව එකතු කරලා.
ඒ වගේම ලබන 4 වෙනිදා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ විශ්වාසභංග යෝජනාව ගෙනව සමග ජන බලවේගය. ඔබතුමාලගේ සහාය ලැබෙයි කියලා කියනවා.
විශ්වාසභංග යෝජන.
A decision on whether we would support the motion is given or not will be made on the day of the vote. We will make a decision then.
අපි ගන්නවා.
Parliamentarians of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya met with opposition leader Sajith Premadasa today. They had discussed the no confidence motion and the impeachment motion that is to be brought against the government. We will bring forward the no confidence motion this week. There are 3 parliamentary sessions. We will table it in one of those sessions.
අන්තර්කාලීන ආණ්ඩුවක් හදන්න අර නිදහස් ස්වාධීන වුණු 41යි කියන්නේ පොහොට්ටුවේ කට්ටියයි බැසි රාජපක්ෂ මහත්තයයි ජනාධිපතිවරයාත් එක්ක සහකච්ඡාවක් තිබුණා.
අන්තර්කාලීන ආණ්ඩුව කියන්නේ ඉතින් ඔය
An interim government would consist of the same old people. Gotabaya Rajapaksa will be president and there will be a few new faces in the government. The protesters at Golface are clearly saying that Gotabaya should go home. We will not join an interim government as long as Gotabaya Rajapaksa is president.
කාලීන ආණ්ඩුව කරන්න අපේ අදහසක් නැහැ.
මේක දිනන්න පුළුවන් නේද ඔබතුමාට?
ඔව් දිනන්න පුළුවන්. මේ රටේ ජනමතය.
Yes, we can win that. If the people's opinion is that Gotabaya must remain in power, then those who believe that can vote accordingly. But if anyone can't vote against the Mahinda Rajapaksa administration, just as the people want, then the people will deal with them. We will table the no confidence motion. We will table an impeachment next week. We will do our duty. Those who oppose this will have to answer to the people.
Operators of Bowser's distributing fuel called off their strike action today. The decision was made after a meeting with the Minister of Power and Energy to discuss their demands.
What are the demands of Bowser owners?
Bowser owners had demanded a 115% increase on their hires as fuel prices have gone up. They began a strike on Saturday, calling for their demands to be met. A solution was reached during a meeting with Minister of Power and Energy, Kanchana Wijesekara, today.
What was the solution?
They agreed to reimburse the losses that we would face in the next 2 months. It will take at least a week to cover the losses we have directly sustained. We decided to resume services tomorrow. Our fares have been increased by about 62 rupees. We agreed to increase fares by 85%. They asked to increase fares by 115%. We proposed to increase it by 95%.
What was the situation regarding fuel supply?
Many filling stations were closed today. Long queues were seen at stations that were kept open. Tensions flared after a filling station in Molligoda in Kalutara ran out of fuel. Filling stations in Polonnaruwa and Kanduruwela had run out of diesel. Our correspondent reported that the situation has been the same for 5 days.
පෝලිං වල ඉඳගෙන තෙල් ගහගෙන පුදුම දුකක් විඳිනවා. අපේ දරුවෝ පුදුම දුකක් විඳිනවා. මේ විදිහට වියදම් කරාට පස්සේ බොහොම සොච්චම ඉදිරි වෙන්නේ.
Will the fuel crisis worsen the situation in the country?
Long queues for petrol were seen even before Bowser owners had gone on strike. The shortage of dollars affected fuel imports to the country, creating a massive shortage of fuel. Sri Lanka is now taking steps to restructure its debt as it grapples with an economic crisis. International rating agencies have downgraded Sri Lanka's ratings in terms of the country's capability to repay its debt. Amidst this situation, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation says it is unable to secure long-term tenders to import fuel. As a result, the government is now paying for fuel when consignments reach the country. However, serious questions are stemming from these transactions.
We have about 6,000 metric tons of petrol at present. The last tanker arrived on April 19th. It's been 12 days. We have about 5,000 metric tons of diesel. They began unloading a fuel consignment about 3 days ago. It is still being unloaded after 32 days at sea. Fuel was imported from the Vitol company at a total cost of $558,000. There is no fuel in the country. We are to receive a consignment of octane 92 petrol and diesel under the Indian credit line. But they are not bringing these consignments down. They are trying to cover up this crisis. These are temporary solutions. This government has paid more than $42 million only in demerit charges. The CPC has made an overpayment of about $22 million for 4 fuel shipments. If we consider the recent shipment, we had to pay $52 million. This was the amount mentioned in the invoice we received on the 22nd of March. But the actual bill only quoted a price of $39 million. However, the CPC had paid all $52 million by the 7th of April. The overpayment in this instant alone is about $13 billion. The central bank governor has opened a special fund inviting donations to import medicines. It's not suitable to mishandle the situation in a country like this.
මේ වගේ මූල්‍ය තත්ත්වෙහි සෙල්ලම් කරනවා කියන එක ඊටාම නරක තත්ත්වයක්.
ප්‍රමාද ගාස්තු මේ පිළිබඳව මම සවිස්තරාත්මක වාර්තාවක් ඉල්ලලා තියෙනවා.
I have called for a full report on how demurrage charges were paid. I haven't received the report yet. Many banks couldn't issue letters of credit as our ratings have been downgraded. Therefore, we had to go for other options to make the purchase. As we are making the payments using cash in hand, I admit that we had to spend more out of the funds that were allocated for future spendings.
අපිට ගෙවීම් සඳහා තිබෙන මුදල් තමයි අපිට පාවිච්චි කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ.
We had received a proposal for crude oil supply from Russia. Its agent was a UAE company. They had provided their initial quotation based on the Singapore Brent pricing method, but they had now asked to change this pricing system. Apart from agreeing to this change, the authorities had agreed to pay according to the Platts crude oil pricing system. The surprising thing here is that even without checking the Charter Party agreement, the CPC had agreed to pay $125,000 as demurrage charges. This is more than the $20,000 mentioned in the agreement. I don't know on what basis they agreed to that. There is suspicion as to who is benefiting of these excess funds. This creates suspicion that the money is ending up in the pockets of a few corrupt officials in the country.
මේ බෙදී යනවායි කියලා සැකයක් ඇති වෙනවා.
ප්‍රශ්නේ අපි බොරතෙල් මිලදී ගැනීමේදී මම අවසාන
In terms of crude oil imports, I can look into the final supplier that we have chosen and then inform you. Usually we purchase fuel from companies in the Middle Eastern region. But if we can purchase crude oil that suits our refinery at a lower cost and then extend the time period for repayment, then we hope to go for that option. But we won't receive crude oil under the Indian credit line. They only provide us diesel, petrol and jet fuel.
උන් ලබා දෙන ඩීසල්, පෙට්‍රල් සහ ජෙට් A1 කියන එක පමණයි.
Under the Indian credit line, we were to receive a fuel shipment on March 24th. Was an emergency purchase required until that ship reached the country? Why did they pay $18,000 as demurrages for 2 fuel shipments that were brought to the country as emergency purchases when there were 2 consignments worth $500 million that were scheduled to reach Sri Lanka?
ඉන්දියානු ණය ක්‍රමය යටතේ
Under the Indian credit line, initially they had agreed to provide us fuel worth $500 million. $400 million has already been used up as we imported fuel in March and April. We have $100 million remaining to import fuel for May. We have placed orders for 2 ships. India has also increased the credit line by $200 million. We called for a tender to import fuel on the 22nd, but no supply came forward. When we extended the deadline until the 29th, some supplies had come forward. Yesterday we finalized it. We will receive 4 fuel shipments this month.
මේ මාසය තුල ලබා ගැනීමට අපි නියමිතලා තිබෙනවා.
News First with the people.
More news follows after this short commercial break. Stay tuned.
යස ඉසුරු පිරුණු තැනක් නෙමේක. ලොකුම සල්ලි තියෙන තැන. අපේ සල්ලිත් පරිස්සම් නිසා.
ඉහළ ප්‍රතිලාභ සමගින් විශ්වාසනීය තැන්පතුවක්.
LB Yasa Isuru, unparalleled rewards for a trusted deposit.
Welcome back to the news. India's central government has approved a resolution passed by the Tamil Nadu Assembly to supply rice and essential medicines as aid to Sri Lanka. According to Indian media, the country's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said that Tamil Nadu government's assistance can supplement what is being provided by the government of India. The Tamil Nadu Assembly passed a resolution piloted by Chief Minister M.K. Stalin seeking permission from the Ministry of External Affairs to supply rice and essential medicines to Sri Lanka worth 123 million Indian rupees. The resolution was unanimously passed by the House, including the opposition AIADMK and the BJP. Addressing a letter to Chief Minister M.K. Stalin, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said the mission in Colombo was consulted over Tamil Nadu's request. The letter added, and I quote, MEA offers that Tamil Nadu government's assistance can supplement what is being provided by the government of India. The government of Sri Lanka's preference is for inclusive distribution, unquote. The chief of the Bharatiya Janata Party for Tamil Nadu, K. Annamalai, who is currently touring Sri Lanka, visited Jaffna today. K. Annamalai, who attended religious observances at the Nallur Kandaswamy Kovil area today, later visited the cultural centre in Jaffna, constructed by the Indian government. Subsequently, Subsequently, he travelled to the Jaffna prison and met with fishermen from Tamil Nadu who are currently imprisoned before calling on several parliamentarians representing the Tamil National Alliance. Our government is of the stance that Sri Lanka must have lasting peace. Dr. Jaishankar, who toured the country a few months ago, mentioned the 13th Amendment introduced following agreements with Rajiv Gandhi's government must be implemented in its entirety. India supports the economic well-being and peace in Sri Lanka's north and east. We believe a welcome solution will be given. India encourages devolution of power. Statements made by the Indian External Affairs Minister are essentially the sentiments of our Prime Minister. He speaks on behalf of all Indians. That is India's stance. If Dr. Jaishankar mentioned something, we believe it definitely must be done. India will support it.
While discussions on the methods of aid are underway between India and Sri Lanka, the woes of our farming communities compound each day. The abrupt decision made last year to ban the use of chemical fertilizer can attribute as one of the key reasons for it. Farmers are unable to avoid this complication even during this year's Yala season. Farmers representing the Minneria farming settlement took to the streets even today, demanding an expeditious and lasting solution. The protesters who commenced their march from the Enterprise Superintendent's office in Minneria travelled to the Hinguragoda town and demonstrated blocking the road leading to the airport. Farmers are helpless. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Mahinda Rajapaksa and Basil Rajapaksa must understand this country is not their inheritance. You have no right to sell this nation. Allow our people to consume a proper meal at least this Yala season. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, together with the Minister of Agriculture, made short-sighted decisions and destroyed the income of farmers. Their version of organic fertilizer is nothing but mud. How can our fields flourish when that is appealed? They do not have dollars to import fertilizer, but they can import ethanol.
The envoys of India and China had met Finance Minister Ali Sabri at the Finance Ministry today. They had assured their support towards addressing Sri Lanka's economic crisis. Finance Minister Ali Sabri had thanked the Indian High Commissioner for India's support over the past few weeks. The Finance Ministry quoted Chinese Ambassador Ki Zhenghong as saying that China supports Sri Lanka's decision to work with the IMF in restructuring its debt. The ambassador was quoted as saying that China is willing to play an active role in encouraging the IMF to positively consider Sri Lanka's position and reach an agreement.
Sri Lanka's inflation measured by Hankey's annual inflation index hit a staggering 118 per annum as of end April this year. That is more than 5 times of the official inflation rate in Sri Lanka. What's the difference between these two inflation indices? Let's take a look.
All island inflation in Sri Lanka rose to 21.5% in March this year as per the NCPI inflation index of the Census and Statistics Department. The NCPI, which stands for the National Consumer Price Index, is measured based on the values of a market basket. How does Sri Lanka calculate inflation?
In order to compile the two indices, what the Department of Census and Statistics does is, it will gather the prices from main markets as given by the price tags by the traders, and then they will compile those prices in accordance with the weight system that they are given to various type of consumer goods which Sri Lankans are consuming.
In contrast, Hankey's inflation index considers underlying economic factors such as opportunity cost and associated costs that one has to undergo to purchase goods or services. The inflation index was developed by Professor Steve Hankey, an economics guru at Johns Hopkins, a private research university in Baltimore, Maryland in the United States, to measure the rate of inflation in countries with currency troubles. How does Professor Hankey calculate the inflationary rate in Sri Lanka?
The main advantage of the Hankey's price inflation number is that Hankey does not confine himself only to the consumer goods, which the Census and Statistics has been covering up. It actually covers all the goods consumer goods, investment goods, and various inputs that we are using in our production process. It actually covers all the goods and services which are available for trade in a country, and also it covers the services as well. So as a result, Hankey's inflation tracker is more comprehensive compared to the limited coverage being done by the Census and Statistics Department. Now, this is the main difference between the two. Census does it from the micro level and then it blow it up to the macro level by using various weights that it has assigned to different kind of consumption goods by Sri Lankans based on a survey conducted in year 2012. Therefore, economists believe that Hankey's calculation of the inflation rate in Sri Lanka is more reliable than the inflation rate being calculated by the Census and Statistics Department.
The Kegol Magistrates Court today rejected the bail application made on behalf of the police officers who were arrested over the Rambukkana shooting. The case pertaining to the Rambukkana shooting was taken up before Kegol Magistrate Vasana Navaratna today.
The police officers who were arrested over the Rambukkana shooting are receiving treatment at police hospitals. Rejecting the bail application, Kegol Magistrate Vasana Navaratna said if the suspects are granted bail, a situation of unrest may arise, adding that the witnesses to the incident may also be affected. Accordingly, the Kegol Magistrate ordered the Criminal Investigations Department to produce all the suspects before court on the 9th of May. The CID was also ordered to produce a B report in court with regard to the incident where a 16-year-old child had sustained an injury to his hand in the Rambukkana shooting incident. The owners of the two fuel houses requested the court to release the vehicles, and the Kegol Magistrate rejected this request as those vehicles were case materials. Kegol Magistrate Vasana Navaratna also issued notice on the Kegol Hospital Director to produce the medical reports with regard to those who sustained injuries in the incident. Further, the CID was ordered to expedite the investigations. One person died and 13 civilians sustained injuries when police opened fire to disperse the people who were staging a protest in Rambukkana on the 19th of April. 22 police officers were also injured in the incident.
Is there a dispute between parliamentarians Harin Fernando and Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca? Questions have arisen on what transpired between the duo during the Samagi Jana Balawega's May Day rally yesterday.
The Samagi Jana Balawega held its May Day rally at Independence Square in Colombo yesterday. The party's lawmaker Harin Fernando had played a key role in organizing the event. A heated argument between MP Harin Fernando and Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca had been captured on camera.
අනිකුත් සියලු සම්භාවන අද මේ නිදහස් මාවතේදී අපි සමරන්නේ. ඒ සඳහා අපි එක්ක එකතු වෙන්න.
Both parliamentarians provided their side of the story today.
හරින් ප්‍රනාන්දු මහතා ඔබතුමා පොඩි ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙනවා දැක්ක මාත් ඒ මොකක්ද ඒ අතන මුනේ නෑ එතුමාට තමයි බාර දීලා තිබුණේ මේ
He was entrusted with organizing the event, but certain things had not been organized properly. I opposed that. I wish to tell him not to get used to that. As the second in command of the party, I had the right to speak about that. I will file a formal complaint with the party leader about this.
උකමක් තියෙනවා. ඒව ගැන කතා කරන්න නායකතුමාට මා ඉදිරියේදී රාජකාරී මට්ටමින් මේක ගැන පැමිණිල්ලක් කරනවා අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම. එහෙම ගැටුමක් නෑ සාමාන්‍ය.
There was no dispute. Lions roar at times. It is justifiable to roar. All of us are lions. Only foxes which can't bear to see us will howl. There are certain media outlets in this country which give priority to drama. They can enjoy that. We shouldn't take this seriously.
Police arrested 3 people in connection with a motor accident involving a motorcycle and a Defender SUV in Kanadulla, Kuliyapitiya yesterday.
Police said the driver of the Defender, a teenager and another individual who were travelling in the Defender were arrested over the accident that claimed the life of a 39-year-old man. Following the accident, locals had set fire to the Defender and completely destroyed it.
And that's a wrap of Prime Time News for tonight. However, before we leave you tonight, just a quick reminder to stay tuned to News First, because up next is Face the Nation, where we'll be discussing about fighting corruption in the new normal. For the News First team, I'm Zaman Ratnayaka. Take care, stay safe, and have yourself a good night.